Hey everyone, I am MSK, aka Master Swag King, coming at you guys today with another video. And in today's video, I will be having a conversation with Mr. John F. Trent himself. You guys probably have seen him on the internet. He used to work for Bounding in the comics, actually. We'll talk about that a bit later. But what's going on, man? How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Glad to be here. Glad to meet you. Things are going
Yes, sir.
great. Christmas
So,
time is almost upon us.
for people who don't really know who you are outside of the Bounding in the comics thing, what's your like origin story getting into like movies, TV, and all that other stuff, like comics too?
Yeah, so I've always kind of been into a lot of the pop culture stuff. I think most people living in the United States have been. We were kind of raised on Saturday morning cartoons, at
Mhm.
least people in my generation, Gen Y. I'm 35, so I definitely grew up watching a lot of Saturday morning cartoons. Watched like Gargoyles and things like that on the Disney
Mhm.
Channel. I really like got into anime with Dragon Ball Z on
Mhm.
Cartoon Network and things like that. But I did watch a lot of like old school cartoons as well. So things like the Herculoids and stuff like that they would do the reruns on Cartoon Network, and then they eventually kind of had their secondary channel, which the name escapes me right now, but they had a lot of the wacky races and stuff like that. The original like Birdman, not the kind of satire that they made of it, or the original like Space Ghost and stuff like that. So I watched a lot of that stuff
Mhm.
growing up as a kid. Digimon obviously was something that I really liked to watch as well. So that's kind of how I got into like pop culture. I was just kind of grew up watching a lot of it as a kid and things like that. And then obviously more as an adult, and I started kind of uh, getting into comics probably a little bit older than most people. I was reading some of the stuff, probably more adult stuff, I guess. I was reading Cal and things like that, published by Image Comics. And that's really kind of how I started getting into comics. Those were some of my first comics. That's a really good comic, actually. It's about a superhero union set in like the 1950s, and a lot of the drama and things that happened and underhanded dealings and things like that happen. So that's kind of, I guess, my origin story, I guess, if you want to call it that.
So I'll ask you, since you were big on like the journalism side of everything, what was it like when you would say something that was literally just what the actors or the talent involved in something would say, and then people would act as if like you're the bad person, but that was never the case. You always just said what they said. It wasn't even your opinion, actually. That was always weird to see.
Yeah, I guess people just don't like seeing the dirty side of those people, and maybe it's
Mhm.
because they see themselves a lot in those celebrities, or they have the similar opinions of those celebrities, and just
Mhm.
don't like it being exposed, and they got to lash out at someone. I'm not, so I guess I can be the punching bag for that. That's fine. Um, but yeah, I didn't really kind of concern myself with a lot of those reactions. I mean, sometimes obviously you'll have
Mhm.
like certain people that you react to. Obviously, you provide a comment to, but for the most part, like I wouldn't even really notice a lot of that stuff because I'm moving on to the next article or the next
Mhm.
story. And obviously like you can go back to that and reference it if they keep saying the same thing over and over again. Someone like Mark Ruffalo, obviously, saying like he says like insane things like every day. I feel like
Yeah, Mark
so
Ruffalo and Mark Hamill, two of the biggest
yeah.
marks in the industry, always have the biggest L takes.
Yeah. So it's like you obviously like can go back and like would re-reference those past
Mhm.
comments or whatever, especially if they were saying something similar to what they had previously said. So yeah, I don't know. I didn't really just concern myself a lot with what other people were kind of saying, and just kind of moved along with what I was doing.
How did you pace yourself after all these many years of working there? Because you did a lot.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it was a full time job. I worked a lot. Probably worked probably like 8 to 10 hours a day. And a lot of days I worked 7 days a week. Obviously, towards the latter end, I kind of definitely did not work on Sundays. Obviously, it's the Lord's Day. I had a reversion to my faith, so I definitely made sure not try not to work on Sundays for the most part. But yeah, I don't know. I just I probably overworked myself, to be honest. I didn't really probably pace myself. But that's just definitely something I'm still probably working on. I probably consider myself a workaholic. I like to work. I think we're made for work, and I think work keeps us busy. It doesn't allow us time to kind of uh, basically kind of have like fanciful dreams on, like, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, but what I'm trying to say is that it keeps you busy, keeps your mind focused. You're not kind of distracted by other things, or you're not kind of being led astray by other things because you're focused on your work and that's what you're doing.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I don't, I didn't, I wouldn't really say I paced myself. I would publish an article, do all the research, get it all done, try and fact check as best as I could, which I think I did a pretty good job at that, and would move on to the next thing. And obviously, sometimes I would do videos or whatever on the articles that I covered. So yeah, I wouldn't probably say I paced myself very well. I would just kind of just get it done.
Did you create Bounding into Comics, actually?
Yeah, I'm the founder of Bounding into Comics. I think I created it back in 2014. It was just on a Blogspot site, and then I think in 2015 I moved it over to boundingintocomics.com. And then in 2017, I believe, I sold it to a company that I was working for at the time, and they let me pretty much run it full time as the editor in chief until recently here in November when I left.
So, given the time frame you were working all this much with it, was there days where you were going like, I'm done, I can't do this anymore? Because how people have that when you work with something for so long. You have days where maybe an article doesn't get enough clicks like you think it should, or maybe things aren't picking up at a certain day because there's slow news. You ever had days like that where you just kind of want to just give up?
I don't know if I'd want to give up. I would more get frustrated as to like figuring out like why is this one not going as big, or why is this one not connecting, and trying to figure out how to get it to go bigger, or find a way to solve the problem that I was facing. It wasn't really more. I don't think I really ever thought about giving up. It was more along the lines of like, how do I solve this problem? How do I fix this problem? How do I move forward? That's kind of how I look at things. I don't really try. I don't have a defeatist attitude. I'm always like, well, let's see what we can do to fix it.
Because obviously I talked to you through Twitter. You are a religious person. So you Christian, actually?
Yes, I'm a practicing Catholic.
Okay. So how long has this been a part of your life, your entire life, right? Being a part of a religion?
Yeah, no. So I was actually what we call a cradle Catholic. So I was born into a Catholic family. I was raised Catholic from as a child, all the way through pretty much through middle school. I went to Catholic elementary school from kindergarten through 8th grade. However, probably towards the end, got really involved in soccer. And soccer pretty much was dominating my life. I was into travel soccer, travel sports, and you go on Sundays. So kind of moved away from practicing my faith during that time. And then obviously went to a public high school. Well, not obviously, but I went to a public high school and definitely became more worldly in those things. And what happens was really had like a lot of culture shock, because didn't really know some of the things that were going on. Was introduced to, I didn't partake in it, but I was like introduced into like marijuana and like that stuff, stuff like that. Like I had no idea what that was when I was a 12-year-old until I got into high school, and then just kind of traveled a worldly kind of route until I met my now wife. And she was a she was a Christian, but she was not a Catholic. She was probably described herself as a Baptist, and kind of really brought me back to Christianity. And through some other events in my life, returned back to the Catholic Church, and have been practicing my faith as a Catholic for probably the past 3-4 years now. I guess I don't know. The time kind of flies by now. I got 2 kids now, so it's probably like been about 5 years now since I've been back. I probably say like 2019 was when I really reverted.
So, because you said you grew up with all this stuff for the most part, like all the Saturday morning cartoons, all the movies that people consider the cult classics now, which is crazy. Some of those movies that were considered straight dog shit when you were around are now considered like some of the best movies ever made. It's crazy how like actual good cinema will, still find its way to get to people no matter what. When did you notice this like huge shift for everything? Because there was a point where everything just shifted. Some would say it was Donald Trump became president. Some would say it was wrong when Obama became president. Some would say it was a lot before that. Or you could see like there was already seeds getting planted for things to make a massive shift. When would you ever be able to identify when the massive shift came in with like everything we were watching, like movies, TV, all that stuff?
Yeah, so I think if you look at the comics, I definitely think it was the Marvel Now stuff. When you look at comics, it was like 2012, 2013 is when I think that was probably the breaking point in comics. But I think if you look at entertainment in general, definitely the Trump election, probably 2015 when he came down the escalator. I definitely think that broke Hollywood, and they made everything about him, and really kind of doubled down on all of their messaging and everything, and really put it to the forefront, and kind of overplayed their hand. They forgot how to really kind of do the slow roll on convincing people on how to behave and things like that. Instead, they decided to use a hammer, rather than a more a finesse tool on that part. But yeah, that's kind of where I think obviously comics specifically, Marvel now, which was 2012, 2013, I think, and then entertainment at large was probably 2015 with Donald Trump's run for president.
It's so weird looking back at everything that's happened, and right as it's happening, because as you get older, you try to make sure you're a lot more self-aware. When something goes on, I'm going to be right there attentive to it. I'm going to make sure I have the best mindset for it. But all this stuff was happening when I was like in high school and stuff, and I was like, oh, it's just people going crazy. That's nothing to worry about. Yeah, I think people are understanding that mindset is not good, and it's only contributed to much more like harsher things. It's like the person that I used to be, where I was like, I don't care about politics that much. It doesn't really affect me. I think I told you, I think before, that was just the worst mindset to have. These things, you should care about them because they do have an effect on your life. They have a massive effect on a lot of people's lives. These are things you should care about. When anyone out there, anyone listening to this video tells you not to care about that stuff, that's because they don't like disagreement or people challenging their viewpoints. That's why they don't want you caring about this stuff, because it's a lot more easier for people to just not care about it and then not think about the things going on, rather than challenging it and asking like, hey, why do we do this? Why do we do that? Why are we involved in this when we shouldn't be? Why do we not have any money despite the country being what is considered like the best country in the world? Stuff like that, I find it so weird that when you get older, your perspective changes on everything people told you not to care about,
Yeah, for sure. I definitely see that as well. I also, I mean, not to be kind of like a contrarian here, but I also see that some of the stuff is kind of like a distraction. Like you don't really need to be paying attention to that. You probably should be maybe paying attention to your family a little bit more, focusing on what's closer around you and kind of creating the life that you want to on that kind of smaller scale, that family scale, rather than dealing with something that might be that you have almost like no control over. I have something called like the Serenity Prayer. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but basically says like basically surrender. Don't really kind of worry yourself over the things you have no control over, instead of focus on the things that you do have control over. So I think there's something to that, but at the same time, you have to be kind of like you have to be focused on some of these bigger issues because they do play a role. Obviously, I don't know how much you want to talk about some of this stuff, but I definitely think like Roe v. Wade, like massive issue. You want to be engaged on that. I think that is so important to what's happening in our culture now, where we literally have laws that allow people to kill their children, and that I think affects everything that takes place in our society. When you're letting something like that happen, well, who's to say that you can't go and like shoot a guy down the street because he just happens to be 80 and he's alive? Well, what's the difference, right? So you see how that kind of plays out, and how those kind of create these absolutely disgusting moral quandaries that we shouldn't even have, because stuff like that shouldn't even be allowed to exist. So obviously you want to pay attention to things like that definitely have massive moral implications, but maybe something that's I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, but maybe something that's just not as important as something like that. Maybe you don't really need to be paying attention to that. You can focus more on your family, spending time with them, teaching your children how to have good morals and things like that, and trying to lead other people to the light, and just live good, happy, fulfilling lives.
Because I don't know if you're married, but you said you have kids, right?
Yes, I am.
So
I'm married. Yeah.
You are. So you know how like now that there's this big thing happening that people should be paying attention to, which is the, not let's say depopulation, because they do want to do that. People are not having as much kids as they used to. And this is not just happening in North Korea. I never saw that North Korea video. Guys, it's not just happening there. It's everywhere. That's a big problem. Because, okay, for just the easy way to explain this for people who don't understand this, is the reason why people have a lot of kids, just in theory, is because when you get older, they'll take care of you. Then they're supposed to have their own kids. They take care of them. Pretty simple. 1 + 1 = 2. That's it, right? So you factor in, if a lot of people aren't having enough kids, we're not going to have any future generations. And then if they don't have kids, well, then we're really fucked. That's just kind of what it is, right? So why do you think, just in America, because you've only lived here, I assume, right? Why do you think people in America
in college for like 3 months, but yeah.
Okay. So why do you think, just from America, because we live here, why do you think guys aren't really trying to have kids with a lot of the women now? Is because a lot of the women are just trash for the most part, of the OnlyFans stars, actually?
I definitely think that plays into it. I obviously have a different perspective because I am happily married. I have 2 kids, hoping to have some more. And a lot of my kind of friends in real life are fellow Catholics, and they have lots of kids. They have more than me usually,
Oh
and
Lord.
and most of the time they're younger than me as well. So so there's that. So I guess it's hard for me to really comment on this because I don't really have a lot of, I have been out of that game for so long. But yeah, I would say that the pornography industry and OnlyFans stuff definitely plays a significant role in that. That stuff leads you astray. It messes with your minds. It makes you weak. It's definitely a tool used to manipulate and control you, and not actually get, like, again, that's something that's like they're trying to get you to spend wait like, so that's something that's they're trying to get you to basically waste your time, make you weak, instead of maybe you should be focusing on something that is happening, like they're sending billions of dollars to a foreign country to fund a war to kill a bunch of people. Maybe you should be paying attention to that and asking questions on why that's happening. Instead, maybe you're on OnlyFans or something like that, and that's a problem. I think there's also just we have a lack of leadership, male leadership in this country too. We don't have really good male role models. You look at the kind of the big male, the biggest male leaders that we have now, and they aren't really setting good examples. I'll even criticize Donald Trump on this. He's lived a very scandalous life. He's lived the life of a playboy. He's had multiple wives. He's divorced them multiple times. And yeah, I don't think that's a very good role model in his personal life. Don't get me wrong. I like Trump's politics, but I definitely think his personal life is not a one that you should emulate or want to follow. I think it looks like he has kind of turned a leaf, though, and has been happily married to Melania and has a son with her and everything like that, and that does look good. But if you look at his history, obviously that it is an issue. And then and again, we have things like this, like easy divorce laws are a huge problem as well. We've turned marriage into kind of this social contract instead of a sacrament that is binding between you, your spouse, and God. And I think that has a lot of issues too. I mean, there's so many issues that we could get into this that play into this, but a lot of it really has to do with people turning away, I think, from God. It's a big spiritual problem that we're facing as a country.
Yeah.
And you see that kind of reflected in the activities and actions that people engage in, and when they engage in those actions, it leads to that kind of this decay that we're seeing throughout society. But if you wanted to point to one thing, it is that kind of lack of faith in God and worship of God.
Oh, because to tackle on to your point, in the Bible, as you know, female, I would say, promiscuity has always been looked down on ever since like time began, actually, even from biblical periods all the way through the industrial age, all the way up to now. I feel like this is the only time period from like now compared to like obviously 30 years ago when like Playboy and all that stuff started having a big rise in the media, stuff like that. I think we live in one of the only time periods where female promiscuity is actually looked at like a good thing. And then when it goes wrong, you'll have people trying to sit down with these women, having interviews with them. But these are the same men that were cheering these women on social media saying, no, get your money, F whatever anyone else says. I just find that so weird how we'll tell women these things right in that moment. But then when their life is completely crashed and they can't find a partner or they can't have kids anymore because who knows what might happen in that type of industry or field, then we're trying to sit there and comfort them when we were the same ones cheering them on. Don't you find that so weird?
Yeah, it's definitely hypocritical. Again, that goes to the lack of male leadership, right? That we're just talking about, because you have these kind of people like cheerleading them on, and then when they're broken, and they're like kind of condemning them for their brokenness, or they're ones cheering them on. And that's why we do need strong male leaders to kind of tell them, hey, this stuff is wrong in the first place, and you shouldn't even be getting involved in this stuff, and it's going to lead to these absolutely terrible disasters. We have numerous examples of that. You pointed out, and it's not just female stuff. Obviously, King David you can point to in the Old Testament, obviously with I forget who it was, and then Samson, obviously too, the issues that he had. So you have those male leaders that, like, obviously David, a great king of Israel, had that faltering. So you can come back, right? I think I'm a testament to that. Obviously fell away, and you can come back, and we have to be able to welcome people back in, but they also have to make those choices to themselves and be welcomed in. But yeah, I look at it that it's not just these women's fault, the women's fault that they're doing this. I mean, this is something that they have kind of been shown as a good, that society is telling them is a good, when it is not. It's not good, and it leads to all these kind of terrible.
People gotta forget, women are very adaptable. Like people usually call women weak, and I find it odd because women adapt in many ways. Like for we're talking like the Roman Empire, as everyone can talk about. Well, when Roman Empire was slaughter, you have wars and all that stuff, all these different foreign nations like Greece, women specifically have to adapt to the new men, otherwise they just kill them. So this is what I think goes on too. There are some girls that drink all that Kool-Aid, but I think there are some girls who don't, but they kind of go along with it because they get demonized if they don't. Women are very like peer pressure always driven to a certain extent where they kind of just more than men go with the flow instead of just actually saying how they feel. Because you have some girls out there now who will be like, I can't find a man, but I got a job and I have a car, but it's like I can't get it right. And then people will try to explain to her certain things and she'll have a conversation back and I'll see all this stuff and she's clearly spewing BS she's heard and she's not subconsciously understanding that's the reason why people don't want to be with you. The stuff it's not about your materials. You can look like you have a good life together on the surface, but inside you could be just destroyed, right? Like some of these girls now, they're trying to show that they can cook and clean, and that's all good stuff. That's all great stuff. But if your personality is complete trash and you're spouting horse shit to people, like you don't need them. It's crazy how these girls will go, I don't need a man, but then complain they don't have a man 24 hours a day. I just find that so weird, you know?
I don't find it weird. I think it makes complete and perfect sense because you have to, like you were just talking about here, we have the data that shows that women are definitely more impressionable. Look at Facebook and Instagram. They have massive amounts of data showing this, proving this. They know what exactly they're doing.
Remember, stats are bigots. Remember?
Yeah. So we have that data showing that, but at the same time, and they are being manipulated by these advertisers, these influencers, all of this stuff that society is kind of telling them what they should be doing. And then at the same time, though, that's conflicting with their actual natural impulses that are telling them something different. So that contradiction or that seeming hypocrisy does indeed make sense to me when you look at it from that perspective, because no matter how much they want you to change nature, it still rears its head.
Yeah, and then you'll have people that'll say like, "Oh, the traditional way of doing things is not good, and capitalism is not good," and it's like I'm surprised people don't even see this. The other way is just complete garbage. They basically, from this podcast I was listening to, they want you basically homeless, living off the government, and tweeting on Twitter about how depressed you are every day.
And eating bugs.
Yeah, I can't wait to have those frog dogs in a few years. Like, holy crap.
Yeah. Robert Downey Jr. is literally creating like crickets for you to eat. Like that's what he's doing now in his like free time now that he's not playing Iron Man.
Good Lord. And it's crazy. Your favorite celebrities will be doing that. And that's the thing is that's why we know celebrities drink that Kool-Aid is because they know the people in charge. So if they pay them all this money, they can have them influence you. They have the influence. They just have to pay them for it. Like who's not going to basically listen to anything RDJ says? Everyone is going to do. Even people that don't like him, even people that think his movies are overrated or trash, they're going to listen to him because he's important to people. That's what influence does. And I hope that people start waking up and going, hey, that person might be a celebrity, but you need to learn how to separate an artist from the art. I mean, people know that very well with Mark Hamill, Stephen King, Mark Waid. Some of your favorite comic creators are like that. They're complete garbage human beings. We're talking like for their politics and how they think about everything, but their writing and art are great, honestly, you know?
Yeah. So one of the good things that I think that we have seen with social media coming out of it is the fact that these celebrities went on there and exposed how just absolutely insane and crazy ideas that they have. So they showed us like what they were and kind of like brought them down to earth, and we can kind of mock them and make fun of them and ridicule them, and they don't have as much influence as what they once used to have. So I do think that is a good thing. Obviously, you have the other issue there where it does lead to negative consequences where they are like mass manipulating people, and we've seen what they did with Twitter before Elon took over and how they were coordinating with the government and all of that stuff to suppress certain voices, raise up other voices, basically use Twitter mobs to destroy people. We have not really seen those kind of have any power since Elon has taken over, where we saw previously like people were having their lives destroyed, losing their jobs. Gina Carano obviously getting fired from The Mandalorian, a perfect example. I think there's the guy from Mozilla, I think he committed suicide. I think I might be thinking of two different people here, but I know there was one guy who did indeed commit suicide after he was pressured. Like I'm sure there's numerous examples of people just taking their lives because of these cancel mobs and things like that. So obviously there's good things coming from social media, but obviously some awful, terrible things as well. And again, it's just a tool. It's not to say that social media is the problem. It's the people using it are the problem and how they use it.
Because since you're a huge fan of comic books, what what was the last run for a character you bought any run for, and what was the last straw you had with buying stuff in the mainstream?
Jeez. I probably the last like main run that I did was Magneto, Cullen Bunn's Magneto. That was like a really long time ago. I don't even remember what year it was, but that was like a really good run. It was kind of separate from all the Marvel Comics continuity, and then they killed it off with whatever, like Axis or something. I think Axis was tied in there, and they killed it off with something. And I pretty much kind of stopped reading after that, and have mainly just kind of gone to like a lot of indie stuff, self-contained books, and self-contained storylines where I don't have to like know like thousands of years of whatever this character is doing, or know that they're going to be changing characters, sexualities, genders, race, whatever, and pushing that message in there. But yeah, Cullen Bunn's Magneto probably was the last one that kind of pops into my mind.
Mm-hmm.
That was really good that I was buying. A lot of times I was buying runs just so I could see what absolute garbage they were putting in there so I could cover it on the site.
God, it's crazy how people will have an opinion about you buying this stuff and then reviewing it with your own hard-earned money, but they won't spend their money on it, but they'll sure call you a bigot and instafo and all these buzzword names, even though it just still blows my mind how people have such a hard opinion about something and a real detailed bad opinion about something that they will just wait for uTorrent or Pirate Bay to have the books and they'll download them. They won't spend their money on them, but they'll sure go out and lick the boots of any of these writers and creators and these companies that are clearly, destroying the comic books themselves. As you've seen, comic industry is doing pretty bad. We just had the one guy come out and say, hey, I can't sell your stuff. He didn't even mention race, religion, none of that. And they tried to gaslight people into believing that, and I was like, what is going on?
He was just calling them, he was sick of their self-inserts is what Glenn was saying.
Yeah,
I think was his name. Yeah,
and that's the biggest problem with the comic industry, dude, is what I've kind of been figuring out through all these many years is even if you are someone in the industry, like you own a store, you pay rent, electricity, the product, all that stuff, if your opinion isn't even valuable, even though you own a if you rent or own a building and you sell their product, how's that not good enough? Do you just have to basically just absolve everything they think and say to get special promotions from Marvel and DC? Because I find it so weird how even if you have a position in the industry, it doesn't matter to people. Like, how can a store owner not have a solid position on anything when it gets demonized?
Yeah, I think the issue there is that you have the writers and the artists, they're getting paid by the companies, right? Marvel and DC or Image or whoever it happens to be. So they aren't in contact with those comic shop owners. They're not involved in that comic shop's business. They're already got paid for the story. Marvel, DC paid them for it. So they don't really care about whatever happens after that anymore. They're not part of that kind of chain. They don't face any negative consequences for this. We see this over and over again. They, like Jason Aaron, perfect example, the guy who basically ruined Thor, did the whole female Thor thing, and now he's writing Batman. So like he's gotten promoted for destroying characters in comics. Like, yeah, so again, like they don't face any consequences for poor sales. They get promoted to the better, the better books or the more prestigious books, the ones that usually are going to be selling more. So I think that's one of the big issues because they aren't actually connected to those sales. They don't face any consequences for their actions or what they're doing in their stories, and that's one of the big issues I think on that point.
Because I just don't even understand how can an industry ever get better if the people that are selling your product aren't listened to, and the actual talent in the industry don't care to listen to them unless they absolve not 90% of their issues, guys, not 80%. You have to absolve everything they say. If they say taxation is good, you better say that on Twitter. Otherwise, you're not getting promotions. If you say that you hate race swaps, gender swapping, all this other garbage that hasn't sold books in many, many years, oh no, you're the worst thing ever. They'll try to cancel you. They'll probably try and call your distributors to try and make sure you don't get your books. We know that's how people function. People don't function in this minds that other people think of, like, no, everything's fine. We'll just have a disagreement and we'll just go our separate ways. That's not how people are at all. If you've lived life for anything longer than maybe 20 years, you'll see how just disgusting, how nasty people really are when they hate something you say. But instead of having a conversation with you and understanding where you're coming from, they'll just choose to try and ruin your life.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it. I mean, look, Gina Carano, I know I talked about her a little bit earlier, but this perfect example. I mean, and it's not
Right?
just coming from people on social media, it was coming from within the company. I mean, she was talking about how they tried to get her to do a struggle session among 30 other people to basically brainwash her into like buying into the ideology that she said she wanted no part in. So yeah, it's just it's utterly insane what's happening. And again, the company that she works for is the company that owns Marvel Comics right now, right? So you know that it's coming down from the top. It's not going to change with the current people in charge. Like as you said, you can't make these comics profitable. They're not going to listen to these people with the current people in charge because they're the ones that were leading kind of these cancel mobs. They're pushing all the agenda and everything like that, and they just don't want to hear it because they want to create their new modern audience. That's exactly what they want to do.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that they want to find a modern audience. They want to create it, and they're going to try and do that through propaganda and indoctrination through their comic books,
Don't you find
movies,
that
television
weird?
shows, etc.
They keep talking about this new audience, and I'm thinking to myself, there is no new audience. The people that have been your customer since they were a little kid, that's your audience. How about listen to them? No, we're going to listen to this. We're going to chase this mythical brand new audience. It's like those people never even bought the books. They probably picked on kids in their school who even like that stuff. Why is that our audience? People that have never cared for this stuff, never bought a comic in their life. They don't even know what characters probably, or even in certain stories, arcs, anything. Why is that what we're trying to go after?
Yeah, so I actually think this is kind of what my theory here is that they want to turn their old audience into the new audience. They want to do it through indoctrination and propaganda. So they want you to accept all of these things that they're pushing through their comics, movies, television shows as good, and want you to continue to buy them over and over and over again. And that's what they want to do. That's the new modern audience. It's the same audience, but have their minds kind of switched to buy into all the stuff that they're trying to propagandize you with.
And it's also super interesting that they had a period point in time where they could have made perfect synergy with their comics and the movies. But if you were watching the MCU movies at the time, you were like, okay, I'm gonna go see what the comic books are like. Oh man, it was a wild ride.
Yeah, I'd probably say I was one of those because I wasn't always reading all of the comics, but I did try and like obviously I watched a lot of the X-Men '97 stuff when that came out, and like, I loved all that stuff. Thought that was really good. I think I tried to jump into like some X-Men run, and I was like, what is even going on here? Like this is just so like I need to like read 20 issues in order to figure out like what's even happening. There's so many different characters. They're doing all kinds of different things, and there's all kinds of different like plot devices, and it's just like like I'm done. I'm out. I'm not even gonna try and do this because it's just too overwhelming.
And
then Guardians of the Galaxy too. The characters don't even look like them. Like Drax doesn't look anything like Drax does in the James Gunn films at all.
I think
so it's like,
that was the big problem.
Who is this character? Like who is he? Who is this? I don't even know who this is. Why does he look like this other character? Why does he look like Hulk? What's going on? Doesn't look like Drax.
No, to ask to your point, it's odd that people will always mention what Guardians did. The problem here is Marvel took that and tried to think that every movie that they did based off someone not known was gonna hit. No, I don't see why people keep doing this. One time when something happens doesn't mean you could just do it again and it's gonna have the same result. They try to do that with Eternals. They were like, we'll just get another underknown, underrated, however you want to classify, however you want to phrase that, group of characters with that underknown director. It will just kind of throw out there and see the result. What they also failed to understand is Eternals wasn't even like back then when they came out. Then the way that the Eternals movie is, it's nothing even as good as Guardians. It's pretty bad. Eternals is awful, actually. So not only did they,
I didn't see it.
So not only did they mess up what they thought was a good idea, they didn't even execute it the same. Oh wait, getting Chloe Zhao to direct a movie in a superhero action franchise is probably not a good idea. They're just hiring to just check boxes. They're like, oh, you're a black woman? Oh God, what's your credentials? I wrote Morbius. You're in.
Yeah. Well, it's also their hubris and their kind of ego showing itself. It's the pride before the fall, right? They thought that people would continue to go and see MCU films because they were riding so high, and you could just put anything out there and people would go out and buy it. Well, look, turns out that that's not the case, and now they're losing hundreds of millions of dollars for each film that they release. I mean, they did not have a winner at all from the MCU this entire year. I mean, the Marvels is, I think, I don't even know if it's even hit 200 million yet. But obviously we know that its budget is probably somewhere close to 300 million or even more. We'll find out when we get the latest reports out of the UK and Carolyn Reed over there at Forbes. But it's not looking good. And then obviously Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, I think did like 400 million or something like that. And it had like a $200+ million production budget as well. So his break-even point was like 500 million plus. So that film lost money as well.
I just can't see how people will see these numbers.
I guess Guardians 3 did make some money. So
yeah, it's just really odd, man, that people will see these numbers, and it just goes to show you, when you look at how people talk about these, they don't know what they're talking about. They think on the surface level, if a movie makes like $500 million, that's a good thing, even though the movie's budget is like $200 million, but there's like 80 million in marketing. Well, the Little Mermaid movie, that movie made like 520, right? But guys, hey, the budget was $200 million, and since big blockbuster tentpoles need a huge marketing budget to make sure they get seen up, like TV ads and just the advertising budgets alone, that's another $100 million right there, just that alone. And it
not to mention like all the
bad
soirees that they have and all that stuff. They got to fly their talent to the press like Good Morning America and things like that. Yeah, car rides and all that stuff. I assume they pay for all that stuff. So that stuff does indeed add up. And that's something that I actually did a video earlier today with OMB Reviews, Odin over there. Good guy. We were talking about Godzilla -1 and how that is actually a smash hit, even though it only has grossed 50 million worldwide. And it's because it has a low budget and it was able to basically bring in all of this. It's all pure profit. And that's why that is a box office smash, because its profit margin is so incredibly high because they kept its budget down low. Whereas like you look at these Marvel films, their budgets are absolutely enormous and they're just not bringing in the amount of money that they need to bring in. People are tuning out. They're checking out because they're just kind of sick and tired of what Marvel has been putting out lately. And you can even look at Guardians 3, even though it did bring in like a slim profit, looking at kind of normal calculations that you look at. But when you look at the number of tickets sold and you compare it to the other two Guardians, it's way less than both the first Guardians and the second. So even with it, while it made a little bit of money, it still was way less than the previous two films in that franchise.
Even movies like Fast X, they'll come out and their budgets will be like $340 some odd million. Then the media out there will put out articles saying, no, they were profitable. Okay, anyone who's going to listen to this, I know you guys are. A movie that has a budget of $340 million, adding $100 million in marketing in it, that movie taking in 710 some odd million, that's not profitable. That's a flop on levels I cannot even comprehend to tell you guys about. That's bad. That's extremely bad.
And I think that just comes down to ignorance, and that's not to say that's a bad thing. It's just I think people just don't really know how the movie business works.
They just look at the surface number. That's it. That's all they look at.
And that's something that we're here to try and help them to learn. So obviously you have the theater take. They usually take around between 50 and 60% here in the United States. It can be a little bit less in or a little bit more in other countries like China. I think the studios only get like 25%, so the theaters are taking like 75%. And like different countries like that have their different takes. But usually people kind of come to the conclusion that studios take about 50% of the box office take. So you got to factor that into. So when you're looking at a film like what the Marvels, where it's 200 million and theaters are taking half of that, so that's only 100 million. And then you look at just what the production budget is going to be close to 300 million. Well, you're looking at, and that doesn't even include whatever they spend on the advertising and all the other costs that are associated with the film. So you're looking at least $250 million loss just from those kind of calculations.
The thing you just mentioned there, we take 50% of our theaters when they get the whole tickets, the revenue, right? Guys, have to factor in to make sure your movie you have to pay money to just distribute it worldwide. You have to pay to distribute a movie worldwide. Now you factor in if our theaters are taking like 45, 50%, how much money do you guys think China's theaters are taking? You get to put your stuff in people's places for free. You can't do that.
Right. It's usually 75% take for theaters in China. The studios, so like Disney or Marvel Studios, would only take around 25% of that would come back to them.
So you see, like whenever I'm talking on the channel about movies making money, no, big blockbuster tempo movies have to make money. There's no ifs, ands, ors, or buts. They have to perform very well. You can imagine Tom Cruise is not happy about Mission Impossible 7 not doing well. And that movie bombed. And I love Mission Impossible. I love those movies, but that movie bombed. It did.
It definitely lost money, and I think rightfully so, because I thought it was a subpar film compared to the previous.
That sucks, because I like the last one's so good. Fallout
Fallout is probably
Amazing.
the best in the franchise. It's really
It's
good. But
true.
then you could definitely tell this one was hampered by COVID and everything. There's the whole like shot where that he's getting into the CIA building or whatever, and they
Mhm.
literally have like the faces of people like kind of like popping up, and it's like this is totally shot during COVID, where they have those like ultra restrictive rules and everything like that. But yeah, they definitely struggle with that. There was a lot of issues I thought with the whole reason why he was like caring about Haley Atwell for whatever reason seemed bizarre to me. There was no really explanation for that. And then there was just like weird editing too with like the train sequence where they were actually
Mhm.
cutting out some of the, like the really cool action stunts that you want to see, where it's like Haley Atwell jumping to the next car. Well, she
Mhm.
jumps and then they cut, and then the next thing you see is her like holding on to the back of the
Mhm.
train. Well, it's like, well, what's going on here? Please, I wanted to see that. Like that's like why I
Also,
watch
it
Mission
didn't
Impossible
help.
movies.
It didn't help that it came out before like the whole Barbenheimer thing. Because for anyone who's kind of a casual, the reason why certain movies have certain release dates is because they can capitalize on all the money they need to make in that moment, and then just ride the week to week to week off the returning customers. When you had two new blockbuster temples coming out, I mean, what are you gonna watch? Mission Impossible 7 that came out last week, or the two other options you have right now?
Right, and that also it was facing competition with like the more premier theaters that bring in like you have to pay more for the seat, so you get more of
Yes.
a share from that. So the bigger screens and all fancy things like that. Whereas like I think Oppenheimer kind of took up a lot of those screens when it came out and kind of booted Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible was also facing I think a really stiff competition from Sound of Freedom as well, especially
Yeah.
in some of the
Mhm.
target demo that film might have gotten and Sound of Freedom came out of nowhere and was a huge success. Might be the biggest success outside of maybe Barbie or Oppenheimer
Yeah.
this year because really small budget. I think it did like 250. I think it's still a top 10 grossing film in the U.S. For this year. Last I checked, at least.
And since I know you don't have a lot of time, this is the last thing I asked you because I saved it for last. Since you were the founder of Bounty in the Comics, why did you end up leaving? Actually, if you want to talk about it, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Yeah. So I haven't really talked about this at all, really. But so as I mentioned earlier, the company that I previously sold it to came under new management in October.
Mhm.
And in November, I was informed that they were going to be taking the site in a different direction editorially. And I decided to resign at that point and have joined That Park Place. And I'm now the editor in chief at That Park Place. And we got some really big plans cooked up over at That Park Place. We're going to redesign the site coming in January. We've got some other things
Mhm.
that we're going to be launching in the beginning of the new year. I'm really excited for that and really excited for the future with That Park Place. And then obviously I've also launched my own YouTube channel, The Trent Report, where I cover entertainment and news here on YouTube. And then I also have something I'm really passionate about is stock car racing. And so I have a
Mhm.
it's just my name, John F. Trent. So I have my stock car channel too that I've launched too. And I'm really excited for those opportunities. But yeah, that's the reason why I decided to leave Bounding into Comics.
Okay. Do you feel any like resentment or anything? Like, could you have maybe done anything different? You ever have those kind of feelings, even just right now? Everyone knows it kind of just happened, but have you had those kind of thoughts recently?
I don't really feel any ill will. I just think that I disagree with their decision, and
It's
I'm
fine. Yeah.
been welcomed over at That Park Place, and we're going to continue doing what I had been doing at Bounding into Comics over there with our hard hitting headlines and our clear messaging on what is right and what is wrong.
Mhm. So yeah, I think it's gonna be crazy how you basically built that from scratch, and it's gonna have this. It has its own name brand value to it, and I know the feeling of starting over from scratch. I lost a YouTube channel that I worked on for like 8 years since October 2015, so I know how you feel starting from
Oh,
scratch. It sucks actually.
yeah, I get that. I get that. I can feel that it sucks. I don't feel that way right now. I feel
Mhm.
really positive and optimistic. I think we have a great team over at That Park Place with WGW
Mhm.
Pro and Jonas J. Campbell, working with people like Valiant Renegade and things like that. So we've got a really good network over there, and there's a lot of
Mhm.
support, and we've got a lot of like good communication, and we have shared ideals and shared values, and I think we're
Mhm.
really gonna make something really good here, and we're gonna take the pop culture world by storm with both That Park Place and the Trent Port and everything we've got going on with the That Park Place network.
Yeah, and I wish you obviously nothing but success, man. I enjoyed reading what you had to put out for Bounding into Comics and all the stuff you did over the years, actually. And it's interesting. How do you think the entertainment landscape is gonna shape out within the next like 5 years? Because streaming. Remember how people were trying to say like, "Oh, the grass is greener on streaming." That is that take age like milk.
Yeah, so I think we're already kind of seeing a shift here. Like big news in the entertainment space was that DC is licensing a lot of their movies to Tubi, which is
Yeah, we just covered that. That's
Fox's
crazy.
streaming service, which is ad supported. And I think basically you're going to see a lot of these studios kind of go back to the cable model that they abandoned for streaming with the advertising, because there's just more money there, and they're realizing they made a mistake kind of investing these in Disney's case, billions of dollars into these streaming services, where they're just going to kind of go back to the cable model. And then they're also going to try and go back to what they were doing before they decided to sink all this money, where they're going to be licensing their movies and television shows to Netflix. We've seen Bob Iger talk about this, that they're going to be licensing some Disney stuff to Netflix, maybe not Star Wars or Marvel like they used to, but they are going to be licensing some of that stuff. You already see this with Zaslav and DC doing this. They're already licensing that stuff there. Sony does this already because they don't really have their own streaming service. They got out.
A24 did it with Max too. They just said, "Hey, no, you'll do it." That's it.
Yeah, so I think we're already seeing some of this taking place, and how distribution and things like that are going to work. As far as maybe messaging, I do think that there might be some studios that realize that the messaging is not a winner, and they're going to be changing that. I think we might see more kind of. I talked to Chuck Dixon about this. He thinks that we're going to see more horror and kind of action, lower budget, mid-tier budget, those films, and those might kind of take off. Given the fact that they don't need that higher bar that we're talking about when it comes to box office grosses, and be successful in that front. I think you might also see the messaging be more insidious. I think that it won't be as beating you over the head as we've seen recently. I think they're going to try and be more sly about it, and they're going to try and take characters and have them be the protagonists, and those protagonists are going to kind of embrace some of this immoral messaging, but try and treat it as it's something good, because this character is doing it, and he chooses the right things, and that's why you should choose it too. We saw a little bit of that in the first Doctor Who special, The Star Beast. Obviously that was kind of gave you both. It was hitting you over the head with this man is a beautiful woman, even though men cannot become women, but it also had this kind of lecture that the Doctor is given by the man, saying like, did you just assume his pronouns? And the Doctor immediately apologizes and says, oh, I'm sorry, which pronouns do you use, he, she, or they? And that's exactly how they want you to think. And that's, I think, what it's going to be insidious like that, where it's like the Doctor saying like, no, what are you even talking about? This is absurd. I'm not going to like, these pronouns are stupid and ridiculous, and you're lying to people, actually like speaking the truth. Instead, he's immediately going along with the message that they want us, the viewers, to kind of take. And I think that's what you're going to see a lot happening now. I think it's just going to be more insidious, and kind of people are going to be kind of fooled by the production value. So it's like, oh, it's really well made, the story's really well done, but it's like, well, it's literally telling you that gay sex is good, though. So things like that, if that makes sense. Or it's like killing this child is a good thing, but everything else will kind of be well made and well done.
It's also crazy that if they don't do what you just said, they're about to lose even more money. I mean, I don't even believe in this concept of really superhero fatigue to a certain extent that people have been bringing up. But if that is the thing, let's argue say that's the thing. The money's not there anymore. People go, superhero, it's not going to get my money. You have to earn my dollar. You know, a lot of movies, as you see, and people are going to point out in their 2023 like movies that made a lot of money. If you look at the ones that made money versus the ones that all flopped, it's bad. It's awful.
Yeah, I don't buy into the superhero fatigue either. I think a lot of it has to do with just telling good stories and telling stories that promote good values. And I know people want to say like, oh, I just don't want any kind of messaging in my films. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. You can look at films like The Lord of the Rings, has some of the best messaging and morals and themes that have ever been put on to a film camera. And it's one of the greatest films ever made. Yeah, and there's a reason why that film is so well loved and so great. It's because it does have all those great themes and that great messaging. I can even point to Captain America: The First Avenger. That film is great because it has really good, strong themes. What does Steve Rogers do? He literally jumps on a grenade to try and save his friends, and that's why he's rewarded with getting the superhero serum and becomes Captain America. Like, it's really good themes, really good messaging. in those films. I mean, Thor, the first Thor, I know there's criticisms of that, but I think it has really good themes too.
I thought about that movie just yesterday. That movie in my mind is like, no, Kenneth Branagh had the right idea when it came to Thor. I just think that, you know, he went a little too much in the human element to it. He should have kept exploring the Asgardian mythology a lot more. I think that's where he kind of messed up at.
Yeah, I get that, but what I'm talking about here is the theme is he's kind of like it's a coming of age story, really. He's Thor is this kind of like teenager rebelling against his dad, doesn't really understand why his dad is doing the things that he's done, and he has to learn a really harsh lesson on how maybe you shouldn't go to war with people just because you want to go and like massacre them, or there's some kind of slight that you had from them. There's more to it than that, and he has to like check his ego, check his pride. And he really learns that at the end of the film. You get this really great moment with him and Odin, and Odin gives him a big compliment. But he even says, "Well, there's still a lot more I have to learn." And it's like he's that like you can't even imagine him saying that in the beginning of the film. He thinks he knows everything, and now he's saying, "Well, there is a lot more to learn." And then they kind of threw it all away with Dark World and all the Taika Waititi stuff, having to like redo everything that he had already learned in the first film.
And as everyone knows where to find you on Twitter at John F. Trent, right? You're gonna be working
JF Trent. JF Trent.
You're gonna be working for your new company, which is awesome for you, man. You know,
TPP News Network on Twitter. I think we're just over 500 followers. I run the Twitter account there. We're trying to beat. We're taking on Discussing Film, and I think we can beat them. So we got lots of the updates, lots of articles on there as well.
Yes, sir. And you got any big plans for your YouTube channel coming up in 2024?
Yeah, we're just keep kind of grinding away. I do daily uploads pretty much every day. Usually I have 2 or 3 videos. Just had one go up, like I said earlier, with Odin from OMB Reviews, talking about Godzilla -1. We talked about, I just did one with Adam Driver. I really like to try and get people on, kind of do 15, 20-minute discussions, and then also do kind of like these news pieces and just my personal opinions. So we'll have more guests. I usually just kind of, I don't really schedule. It's like, hey, do you want to do this week? There's like a topic that came up, and I think you're a good person to talk to. So it's really kind of on the fly, things like that. But we've had a lot of guests already, a lot of different guests. So I plan to have more guests coming on. Probably try and get some maybe bigger YouTube personalities, maybe Gary from Nerdrotic or Valiant or Pro coming on as well. So maybe a comics division or whatever, some of those folks too. So that's kind of what we're going on there with that. And then, so yeah, that's it. And then obviously the racing channel, I plan on doing coverage of a lot of short track racing and NASCAR stuff moving forward.
And to end this video off, the reason why these companies have been failing now, where we come to comics, movies, TV, whatever you're consuming, they did it to themselves. I mean, just look at the MCU. That franchise, what is total like $30-some-odd billion? That's not because fans didn't support it. Fans came out and supported the movies. They tanked their own franchise because their egos got so big. They thought they could just do TV without a showrunner, that's ridiculous. They started having freaking this mindset of like, oh, we'll just edit the movie in post. It's all this nonsense, man. Well, DC, they never really ever got off the ground because Zack Snyder's complete garbage, but they attempted to, and they came up and then came back down. And you have other franchises too, like Halloween completely ruining Michael Myers in his potentially last theatrical movie. You have the same stuff with Scream 7, which happened where, you know, even though Melissa Barrera was Palestinian, she did mention something where she mentioned that why do they only show you one side of the narrative? Why don't they show you both sides? They fired her because she said, why don't they show you both sides? Oh my goodness. Like, why would anybody want to work in Hollywood with these kind of stipulations? You have to basically hide yourself. Hide who you are, hide your religion potentially if you are religious or whoever you are, because if you say who you are, they'll just come over and just boot you out if you don't believe in 100% of their values. That's why it's better to just do stuff like this where we just get microphones and just start shooting this stuff, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people going out there that don't believe in a lot of the ways that Hollywood's operating. I think Gina Carano is doing that with like the Daily Wire. We're seeing some of that stuff and how she even canceled a movie because she was not going to follow the kind of COVID laws that the union was setting up and stuff like that. So there are examples of that. I think Bent Key is doing some of that stuff. We'll see how their current products are, but I think some of the films that they have released have been pretty good so far. I think those are mainly acquired things rather than them creating them themselves. But there's other people coming out there. I mean, Mel Gibson's got some stuff happening as well. We've seen stuff with Mark Wahlberg, Father Stu, really good stuff. You're seeing stuff from Angel Studios that's really good as well. They just came out with The Shift. It's a pretty interesting sci-fi, has really good themes and messaging. I think it was a little rough in the beginning, but it really picked up kind of in its second act and took off from there. Yeah, and they have some. Obviously, they did Sound of Freedom, and they're going to be coming out some other films as well. They've got a biopic on Mother Cabrini coming out earlier this year from director Angel Monteverde. I think that's his name. I think it's Alejandro Monteverde. Sorry, Alejandro Monteverde, who did Sound of Freedom. So there's lots of stuff coming out. We just got to find it and get it out there in front of people, because I do think there is a lot. Like, again, we have like the indie comic scene, I think, is doing really well. While Marvel and DC, like as you said, are killing themselves, there are people that used to work with them and are creating their own stuff, and in many cases it's better than what they
can also make more
created.
money. Crazy. Yeah. They can make more money doing their own thing than working for the biggest comic companies essentially in the world. That's oh, exactly. Goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, the fact that Eric July's I Saw Him #1, #2, and Alpha #1 had probably made more money than most mainstream 2 books. Sorry, the fact that those 3 books I just mentioned right there probably made more money than the biggest mainstream 2 comic companies is. I mean, like, so far, is it really that surprising? They've been tanking themselves. It's basically open season for anyone to go in there and just challenge them at this point. You know?
Yeah, none of this is a surprise. I mean, I've been covering the downfall of the comic industry for over half a decade. So, and we've been talking, there's been voices telling people how to fix this for longer than I was running Bounding into Comics. So this stuff isn't new. It's not a surprise. There've been plenty of warning signs and they've completely ignored them, and they continue down the path that they started. They're bearing the fruit. We're seeing the fruit of their tree, and it's poisoned.
Yeah, and it turns out longtime fans don't like it when their characters are race swapped, gender swapped, name swapped, whole bunch of multiverses that don't make any sense, whole bunch of non-canon stuff. They don't like that. They also don't like spending a lot of money on their pull lists for stuff to eventually, not matter. That will definitely make people that love this stuff not love it instantly.
I know people who are spending. I mean, I know I was spending hundreds of dollars every month at my local comic shop.
You get a whole giant box for your pull list and everything.
Yeah, I don't do that at all anymore. So, so that they've done it to themselves, and they have the only person that they can blame is themselves. But they will try and blame other people and lash out.
That's the thing in life, guys. You guys must need to understand. People will blame everything else but themselves for why they failed. That's it.
Right.
And I want to say shout out to Mr. John F. Trent coming on the show and talking, to me. Can't wait to, have you on again for the Iron Man podcast. But you said you were, didn't have too much time today. So I thought we could just get it really quick, and we could just talk and have a good time. So yeah, anything else you want to say before we head out, actually? Anything else you want to
No, thank you for having me. Really appreciated this conversation. This was great. Looking forward to doing more with you. This was awesome.
Yep. Anytime, brother. See you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I'm MSK, Master Swag King, and I'm signing out, guys. See you guys later.